I'm very much looking forward to welcome on stage Julian Teicke, and please tell us more how you have gone from Dine Deal to wefox and raising so much capital. Thanks for joining us on stage.
Thanks.
And looking forward.
Great. Well, thank you very much. So I was just thinking when I was looking at the pitches, this is me 7 years ago, 2015 we launched, and it was actually in a shared flat in Universitätsstraße here in Zurich. I went to one of these, and it was an actual elevator pitch. So it was in an elevator, in a tower, and I had around 30 seconds to pitch my new, insurtech business model. So I was getting in there, all nervous, and I had these 3 guys there, and I had 30 seconds to pitch. And then at the end of when we arrived at the top, they were just like, but there's Knip out there. And I don't know if any one of you remembers Knip. And they already are so big, you're never going to make it. And I left and I got a red card, and it was not funded. And today, 7 years later, we are the most valuable insurtech in the world. We just raised another round at a $4.5 billion valuation, and raised altogether around 1.2 billion US dollars. And I want to take you a little bit on the journey, right? Because that journey is probably something that is interesting to you in the stage you're at. Just a little bit about my background. I was at Dine Deal before, which some of you might know. We sold Dine Deal in 2015, and then we started wefox. And I had absolutely no clue on how to fundraise. So at Dine Deal before, I was taking care of the operations. So I was taking care of the customer service, I was taking care of the supply chain, I was taking care of product and technology, kind of all internal functions. And then, all of a sudden, I was CEO, and we invested all of our money from the exit into building wefox, and then money was running out, and I had no clue on how to fundraise. And I just went wild, right? So I'm originally from Berlin, so I tried to figure out, I didn't know any investors. Are there any friends in my network in Berlin who know any type of investors? And I just tried to somehow get in meetings. And I just remember traveling from Zurich to Berlin to this Shark Tank of investors back then, and having these absolutely terrible pitches being thrown out of the meetings before the meeting actually ended, just looking in bored faces of investors. And we were really actually completely running out of money. We were already around 80 people. And then there was more like a coincidence that got me to the first fundraising, which was 5 million on a 20 million pre. And that was because at Dine Deal, we used to implement a lot of Salesforce. And they asked me one day, because not a lot of startups use Salesforce, hey, can you go on stage and talk about how cool Salesforce is for startups? And I said, yeah, I'm going to go on stage. I'm going to tell people how cool Salesforce is for startups. And then we were running wefox, and all of a sudden I get this invite to meet Mark Benioff, the CEO and founder of Salesforce. And I didn't even think about fundraising. So I was just like, whoa, this is my idol. I really want to meet him. I want to learn how he did it. And then it's basically the inventor of the cloud, right? And then we were at dinner. It was like maybe 10 people. And then they did this intro round. And I was like, Mark, I'm a huge Salesforce maniac, but really, look at all of these old companies. They're going to die out faster than all of us anticipate. And essentially I looked at your market share in new tech, like the really disruptive business, and it's close to zero, right? And if you don't gain market share with the young disruptive businesses, you're gonna die just like the dinosaurs. And I can tell you, in the startup scene, Salesforce is called an overpriced CRM system. So if you don't change, you're gonna die, right? And then he looked at me, this billionaire, is like, what the hell is this guy doing at my dinner? And then like second thought was like, are you looking for money? And I was like, yeah. And that was how we raised the first 5 million on a 20, and it was just pure luck. And then I said, all right, this may never ever be luck again. I need a system. So I got back to this annoying guy in the elevator telling me, you know, Knip is so big, you're never going to achieve it, you know. And then I looked at how much did they raise for the Series A. And then I saw, okay, they raised 15 million. So this is the invention of my magic fundraising formula. Because I took that number and took it times 2. So 30 million. And I developed a plan backwards. What if I were to raise 30 million? What would I be doing with this money? Where would I be investing that type of capital? And what type of results would I be achieving? I didn't go to the team and said, listen guys, give me your ideas. I started with a random number and said, I want to convince myself of being able to deploy that type of capital in a good way. And that just is a completely new perspective because it opens a lot of new perspectives, new horizons, new out-of-the-box thinking. And back then I realized what we have to do, if I had this type of capital, is not just be digitizing insurance distribution, so giving brokers technology to sell to customers third-party insurance products. We actually need to build our own insurance company to really have a smooth customer journey. And with 30 million, I can do that. And then I convinced myself of being able to deploy that. Then I imagined how exactly is it going to feel like once I've achieved it, and I typically always take the news article saying wefox is raising this 30 million Series A round as a starting point. I imagined that, how it feels like, and I work myself backwards in my imagination. So I think about what exactly happened until that moment actually became reality. And then I started talking about it because I didn't just keep it for myself. And I went to my co-founder and I was like, guess what? We're gonna raise a 30 million Series A round. And he's the skeptical type. But I tell you, when I told him the plan, he was jumping in the meeting room like I've never seen him jump before. And he was like, yes, we're gonna make it. Yes, we're gonna make it. And I realized, wow, if I'm convinced of this, I can convince others. The next day, an investor comes, the first investor comes into the meeting. We pitched the story, and we got a term sheet a few days later for 28 million US dollars. Almost 30, we almost made it. So I was like, wow, this is a tremendous thing. Like, I did all of this work from basically starting with an absolutely random number. So I continued this. And then when Series B came up, I looked at what was the largest Series B round that was ever raised in insurtech. And it was a company called Lemonade from the US. And they raised 120 million US dollars. So I was like, all right, we're gonna raise a 240 million Series B, right? And then I was like, okay, who the hell can invest 240 million? That was like 2018 or something. Who can invest 240 million into a startup? And then I only thought of one guy that was crazy enough and able to do it, and that was Masayoshi Son from SoftBank. But I didn't know they just put like back then 100 billion fund to invest into startups. Unseen before, like the largest one before was like 2-3 billion. They put 100 billion, right? And then they wanted to deploy it in 2 years, which they actually made. A lot of scandals happened and stuff didn't work out that well. But back then, it was the only one I could imagine that would invest that type of money. So I didn't know anyone who knew him. So I kind of started. Then I met the first junior of SoftBank in London. Then that junior invited me into a partner meeting, also in London. And then the CEO of the SoftBank Vision Fund said, "You have to meet Masa." So I fly over to Japan. And I'm going to tell a short story and then the story that actually worked, right? But the short story should give you an idea of the amount of failures on the way to achieving your goal. And the amount of fear and the amount of pressure that's on you, and you all know what I mean. So I came to the 23rd floor in Tokyo to meet Masa. And I just arrived in Tokyo, and I made a huge mistake. The guy from SoftBank was sitting next to me, and we were talking the entire time. I didn't sleep. The meeting was right in the morning. They already told me his floor is really hot. It's like always 23 degrees. 30 degrees, because he likes it hot. So I come in there. I'm overtired. I'm starting to sweat. They lead me into the meeting room. The meeting room is a table with at least 100 seats, very long meeting table. Nobody's sitting there except Masayoshi-san at one little end of the table. And then he sees me, and he's just like, "Okay, go." And then I didn't have this thing, so I always had to ask to click on. And after like 2 minutes of my pitch, overtired, sweating, he was like, "I know everything you say, you have 2 more minutes." I was like, wow. And then I continue talking, and he actually falls asleep in front of my eyes and doesn't wake up. And I leave. And I go to my hotel room. Can you imagine how shit that feels? And I fly back to Berlin. That was the only meeting I had in Tokyo. And then he calls me again. They call me again, say, "Sorry, Masa had like a long week, board week, and he didn't sleep a lot. Can you come in again?" So I took my CFO with me, my co-founder, and I told him, all you have to do is sit at this long, long table behind Masa, and with every word I say, you just have to pretend like I'm the most awesome human being in the world. You just need to be like giving me a lot of self-confidence. And I just remember from that meeting how he sits there and starts like cheering at me all the time, every word I say. And basically, Masa stands up. We start drawing on the whiteboard. Then he says, "Listen, I only invest in the best founders in the world, and I'm going to invest $200 million US. And then I said, no. We said 200 million euros. And he was like, so 240 million. Okay, $240 million. And it was exactly the amount from exactly the person I had just started with in my head 6 months ago. That's the message I want to give you. Start with a goal. People, we don't set ourselves high targets because we are scared that we lack the confidence and we have too much doubt about ourselves to achieve it. But there's an antidote, which is the second step. Eliminate the doubt. Build a plan that makes you believe in your abilities to achieve it. The third step is imagine how it's going to feel like with all of your 6 senses and think about every single moment on the way to achieving that situation. The fourth is talk about it. Tell people. By the way, people are going to feel whether you've done the work or whether you just talk BS. Whether you already went through the imagination, whether you are already that person that has already in this mind raised that money, or whether you're talking BS. and then act according to your plan. And then things will go wrong. And that's a continuous exercise. You need to work on eliminating your doubt every time. The bigger your goal, the more life is going to throw shit at you, trying to convince you that you're wrong and incapable and not worthy of achieving this target. So the higher you set your target, be prepared for the more shit that's being thrown at your face. Okay? So I hope this is helpful, because I want... I really would love to see from the crowd here businesses that change the world. And on your journey, I wish you all the best. You have what it takes to change the world. So believe in yourself. Thank you.